What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the first edition of our Thursday show, the preview show, where we take a look at some of the must-watch games in the state of Texas, I should say. Joining me, special guest today, Scotty will usually be on the show, but joining me today, our very own VYPE ambassador, Will Turboff. Will, how are you doing today, man?
I am doing great. I probably couldn't be doing any better. Texas high school football starts today here on Thursday. We've got some great action lined up, and we're going to get to talk about 6 of the best games across the state.
Right? This is week one of high school football, but it really could be like state finals almost with the amount of just great games we have on tap for this week. Hours away, mere hours. By the time this show is over, I mean, really, if you look at 5-6 hours away. So, I mean, this is amazing. I cannot wait. And let's just jump into it. And let's start off with what is the only matchup that we have that is not Texas versus Texas. It is Texas versus California. That is Mater D versus Duncanville. This one, Duncanville last year played IMG and did not fare so well. I want to start with you, Will. Will Duncanville face off better against Mater D than they did against IMG last year?
You know, I think everything really has an asterisk around it last year with COVID and especially playing IMG, who was probably able to dodge a lot of the guidelines and kind of, they're used to traveling and weird situations like that. And even IMG and Mater D are two completely different teams. We know IMG is, the preppiest school that you can go. All those guys are elite athletes. Almost the same on Mater D, but not exactly. I think Duncanville won't come out with the win here, but it's definitely going to be a lot more of a fight from them. They just have this Duncanville team is loaded. I believe it was 9 out of the top 83 in the state of Texas for recruits in 2022. So this team is just absolutely stacked.
Yeah, and I think the key to the game will be just how well Mater D's quarterback does. His sophomore quarterback, Elijah Brown, he passed for 973 yards last year with 15 touchdowns, only 1 interception. But other than that, I mean, you got running back Raleek Brown from Mater D, wide receiver C.J. Williams, number 7 player in California. Just this team's actually absolutely stacked. They're coming in with a 45-3 record over the last 5 years. Duncanville a 61-8 record over the last 5 years. So it's not like Duncanville hasn't done bad. I mean, obviously everyone in Texas knows Duncanville was a Hail Mary away from being a state champion 3 years ago, and just one of the all-time great plays. Put that to the side. And like you said, last year, IMG and Duncanville, COVID times. I think it was one of the first games of Duncanville's season, if I'm not mistaken. So I do think...
second or third.
Yeah, I do think Duncanville fares a little better, but you have to give the edge to Mater D. We're talking about programs that you can build from outside of your area code, if you will. Whereas, because Duncanville, it's like you're in the area code, you have to go to Duncanville High School. Mater D is a little bit different than that, as we know. So, they get to kind of build that team up, whereas Duncanville, they have to play with who they have and really train up, which I think is a testament to Texas high school football when you talk about UIL anyways. So I got to give the edge to Mater D here, but I think Duncanville will fare a little bit better than last year. Will, any final thoughts on this game before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Last year, we saw Duncanville out of the playoffs a little bit earlier, and that was just because they didn't end up in the state championship. They lost to South Lake Carroll, and we're going to get a chance to talk about them in a minute. But Duncanville may have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They've lost some talent. They still have a lot more. But I think they see themselves as underdogs this year since they weren't one of the last 2 teams playing in the state.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they definitely will have to come out with a chip on their shoulder. And you think they will? You have to imagine Coach Samples has probably been pushing that all summer. I think a lot of people were disappointed in how they finished in the state semifinals. That they should have been in the final. So that maybe that they were sleepwalking towards the state final, and South Lake got them. So I think Coach Samples will have them ready. But again, I think Mater D will come out the victors there. And like you said. Then we'll move on to our next one. And just like you mentioned, South Lake Carroll got the best of Duncanville last year. They are facing Highland Park, another just heavyweight matchup. I think that one is on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that. I should.
Thursday, I believe it's Thursday night on ESPNU, I think.
There you go. Thursday night on ESPNU, South Lake Carroll versus Hyde Park or Highland Park. I'll confirm that here in a second while you're talking. But obviously, the big storyline in this one is new quarterback for South Lake Carroll. Will this quarterback be good enough to lead South Lake Carroll in this game and throughout the season?
Well, I mean, it's one thing to lead South Lake Carroll and another to live up to the legacy of the guy that you're taking over. I know Caden Anderson has learned a lot from Quinn Ewers. I know they're great friends and they've been in contact over the last few weeks since Quinn has enrolled at Ohio State. I think he's going to lead this team. I think they're going to have a great year. But Owen Allen is the name to look out for. He's a running back. He put up over 2,000 yards last year, and that was with the best quarterback in the country. So if he put up 2,000 last year, albeit Quinn was out in some of the games last year, I wouldn't be surprised to see Owen break the record this year. There's going to be a couple running backs in the state of Texas that I think are just, some of the best in the nation. He's severely unrecruited, and I think South Lake Carroll is going to just dominate this one.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it spot on there. By the way, yes, they do play Thursday at AT&T Stadium, so they're playing at Jerry World. As we know, Highland Park notorious for having the Joneses on their side, if you will, 'cause that's where Stephen Jones's kids went. So it makes sense. But yeah, I think people are worried that because Quinn Ewers left, that all of a sudden that drops him down. We kept him at number 2 in our DFW rankings that just came out yesterday. We posted them today on the site. So South Lake Carroll starts number 2 in our preseason DFW, right behind Denton Ryan. And I think when you have the squad that South Lake Carroll has, having the time that Owen Allen will have throughout the season, because hey, you know what? They may stumble for the first few games. You never know. All you have to do is win district. Right, and at the end of the day, who cares what your record is at the end of the season if you're hosting that trophy up, right? So, having him where he can start right now and kind of progress, and he's been behind Quinn Ewers, so it's not like he's been he's been watching what was the top prospect in the nation before he left. So I think he's going to be prepared, and I think even if South Lake Carroll stumbles early in the season, by the time district rolls around, I think he's going to be just fine. But I think you're right. I think South Lake Carroll has the edge to me in this one. Any last thoughts, Will?
Yeah, these 6A versus 5A matchups, they're really tough. Highland Park is already at a disadvantage. They finished their season out last year in a really ugly game against Denton Ryan, where neither team could really get any offense, and they especially couldn't. They were locked down by a great defense from a team that ended up winning a state championship, and they've lost almost all of their starters. So I think this may be a pretty rough year for Highland Park, but a rough year for Highland Park may just be 2 or 3 losses.
Yeah, and hey, if there's a game you want to play, especially this early, it's against an opponent like a South Lake Carroll, because you really get to see where you stand, right? Like you said, a 5A versus a 6A, but at the same time, if this is a close game, that's going to give Highland Park all the motivation throughout the rest of the season. Like, okay, we played these guys close, we can do anything at the 5A level. So I think that's what I love about when a lower classification plays a higher classification, especially if it's a close game or even the lower classification wins, because it's really just a tool that's going to help the team out as the year progresses.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to, that's DFW. So we're going to do, this show we'll try to do about 2 teams a week from each kind of region, which is DFW is one region, Austin, San Antonio is another region, and Houston is another region. Let's move to Austin and San Antonio. We'll look at one game from San Antonio, one game from Austin. The San Antonio game, 2 teams that ranked in our top 10 in the VYPE rankings, the VYPE Austin San Antonio rankings. Brennan taking on Reagan. This is another one. These are probably the top 2 teams in San Antonio, and they're squaring off in week 1. So this is going to be a good barometer for both of these teams to see where they stand as the season starts. Will, take it away. Brennan versus Reagan. What you got?
Yeah, we've got a tale of 2 cities with this one. Brennan coming in with an experienced quarterback, a guy that looked really good last year. That's Ashton DeBose. Had a really incredible year last year. He's looking to repeat it this year, of course. Britton Moore will be the quarterback for Reagan, it looks like. He's a little bit less experienced, didn't put up a lot of numbers last year, but obviously wants to do it this year. And Brennan has won in 2019 and 2020, so they could make it a three-peat this year with a win on Friday.
Yeah, and it does seem like, to Reagan's credit for for the quarterback, Brenton Moore, that it does seem like they are a pass run like almost right down the middle, right? So their running back, Carson Green, had over 1,200 yards rushing and 21 touchdowns last year. So it really seems like more of a balanced attack. So I think, obviously it sounds like the last few years Brennan has been able to figure that out. So it's really going to be, can Reagan, really step up and, take that next step. Maybe if it's in the passing game, relying more on it or relying more on the running game, one or the other to really boost them up. I mean, but Reagan's no slouch, 9-2 last season. So I look for, I'm going to, this isn't really a pick 'em show, but I'm going to say, I think Reagan will get the win in this one and stop Brennan from getting that three-peat coming oh so close.
Yeah, you never know what could happen. It seems like we're talking about Reagan in just about every season. They're killing it in all sports right now.
That is true, right? They were a baseball power up until the playoffs. They didn't make it all the way, but they were a baseball power. They're doing well in volleyball so far. And now football, here they are right now, just on the cusp. And we'll see. Like I said, them and Brennan are going to be the two teams to watch. And it makes sense, or it doesn't make sense, but it is great that they play each other in week one. Because I think at the end of the year, I think these two teams are going to be sitting probably, at the top of the classification, for San Antonio still. Let's move on to Austin now. We got Vandegrift taking on Cedar Park. I don't know if this is necessarily the top matchup in Austin. Like, I know like Lake Travis, I think, is playing Arlington Martin, I believe it is. So there's some bigger games out there. But I think this one is good for the fact that you have Cedar Park, who lost their starting quarterback, Ryder Hernandez last year. He's a senior graduated. So you got a new quarterback there. Vandegrift, they've got some pieces that they have to fill in. But when you just think of Austin, for me being in Austin, Vandegrift and Cedar Park, those are two teams that you just always constantly think of. Will, who has the edge in this one?
Well, I'm going to have to say Vandegrift just because of the offseason. Really take it from that state championship game all the way until now. They lose their starting quarterback. They lose their head coach out of nowhere. He goes to Barbers Hill. They get a new coach pretty late here, I believe June or July. I know he's been able to develop a relationship with some of the players there, but I really don't think they're going to be prepared enough to play a team like Vandegrift this early on in the season.
Yeah, and these teams know each other well. They were district opponents before Vandegrift moved up to 6A, and I think this is the 12th straight year, so they've continued kind of this rivalry even when Vandegrift moved up. But, because we don't know what quarterback Josh Pale from Cedar Park can do yet, you really have to have the edge to Vandegrift. Now, of course, the rivalry is still going to be there, but the quarterback situation, like you said, plus a new head coach, I think all those things are things that having a loss in early seasons isn't going to hurt, especially when it's to a team like Vandegrift. So I would agree with you there. Let's move on now to our final in Houston. So let's start with Katy, and they are taking on. Let me pull up my notes here. Clear Springs. And I think this one is a pretty easy one to pick if I were you. Katy, defending state champions, really haven't lost very many key pieces, if you ask me. Is this one even in doubt, Will?
I mean, we got to give it to Clear Springs. They've got one of the best receivers in the country, Noah Thomas. He's committed to A&M. They do have a few questions, everywhere else. No one was really sure who's going to be the starting quarterback for them. I still don't know who it's going to be. But Clear Springs will maybe put in a good fight here. Katy, just another one of those teams that is just loaded and loaded with talent. Caleb Koger, who is only a junior now, just led a team to a 6A state championship as a sophomore. I know he spent a lot of time in the offseason improving. So I think this Katy team is somehow going to improve on what they did last year. They lost to Tompkins in a district matchup, their first district loss, I think, since 2008. So I wouldn't be surprised not only to see Katy win against Clear Springs, but win just about every game.
Yeah, and look, I mean, they met last year. It was actually a pretty close game, 28-13 last year's, and I think it was they were the only one of the only two teams to hold Katy under 30 points, which says a lot about Katy's team last year. But when you look at their like meetings in the last few years, 59-7, 49-7, Katy's really controlled this series the last few years. I don't see that changing in week one here. So yeah, I think we're going to be saying this a lot. K's going to win. I think you're going to hear that a lot this year. Let's move on to our last game in our preview show, which is Bridgeland versus Clyde Kane. This game, of course, going to be on ESPN ESPNU on Saturday, August 28th at 8 p.m. This one, it's really kind of a tale of two players, if you will, for two different reasons. You have Conor Wigman for Bridgeland, just an all-star quarterback and baseball player. Let's not count him out on baseball either. And then Jaden Blue for Clyde Kane, who, as we all know, is skipping his senior year to make sure he's healthy for college and potentially the pros. So really, that's what I mean by a tale of two players under different scenarios. Is Blue being not playing, is that going to be a huge factor for Kane, or do they have enough talent outside of him to win this game, Will?
Yeah, we've talked about this whole situation already on the VYPE podcast this year. Jaden Blue is an incredible talent. He made a decision that riled up a lot of people, and he's doing what he thinks is best for him. This Clyde Kane team is still extremely talented, though. Matthew Golden, who is a wide receiver committed to TCU, I got to see him in the state 7-on-7 tournament, taking passes from Carson Roper, who's their quarterback this year. This team looks incredible. I think they're going to put up a fight against Bridgeland, but Conor Wigman is completely locked into the football season. He already announced he won't be playing baseball in the spring for Bridgeland. He'll go ahead and go on to A&M in January as an early enrollee. So I think Wigman is completely locked in. I think he's upset about how last season ended, and I think he's going to send a message on ESPN against Clyde Kane.
Will it be as close as last year's 2020 opener between them? That one was a thrilling 49-42 victory for Bridgeland. Do you think it will be as close, or do you think it's going to be one of those, hey, Conor Wigman, he's going to show everyone that he's arrived, if you will?
Yeah, the thing with Wigman is that he is not he gets excited and he has a little charisma, but he is not, this game being on ESPN doesn't really change anything for him. He's going to treat it just like any other game. He's going to go out there, do what he does best. That being said, I think it's going to be another shootout. I think 49-42, we could see something similar to that. Matthew Golden is going to get quite a few big passes in this game, and it'll be really interesting to see how Clyde Kane changes from a very run-heavy offense to likely very pass-heavy.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. All these games, like if you have, like, for instance, Duncanville versus Mayor D on Flow Sports, the Bridgeland and the Southland games on ESPN. If you can watch these games, folks, watch these games, because these games are going to be great. But that is going to do it for our Thursday preview show. Will, you want to plug us a little, give us a little tease about maybe who's in the works for next Wednesday's VYPE podcast? Any names in the works yet?
I mean, we could have potentially talked about one of the guys who could be on the VYPE podcast next Wednesday, possibly in the game that we just talked about, but that's secret information right now.
Hey, I love it. Let me tell you something, folks. Will gets the best interviews at anyone at VYPE. It's amazing some of these interviews he's gotten since he started on the VYPE podcast. He gets these great athletes on, and I cannot wait to see what this tease could become. And let me tell you, Will, I'm excited. I'm always excited when you drop those files in my Google Drive folder to view, because I'm like, who has he gotten this week? But Will, thank you so much for joining me on the first episode of the VYPE preview show. Tomorrow, of course, at noon, we'll have our Pick'em show where we will pick some of the games in the state of Texas and who's going to win those games, and keep track of it throughout the season to see who is the king of the Pick'ems, if you will. Will, before we go, I want to give you the floor for any last shout outs or anything you want to say.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Make sure to tune into the VYPE podcast every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Me, Ashton Lux, and Ella Hestan. We've got a great crew this year. We're going to have some great guests. We already have. We've had Mabry Matower out of the Woodlands and Jonah Wilson out of Decaney, and the best is yet to come. So, yeah, thanks for having me on. I know Scotty's going to be on here in the next couple of weeks, but I'd love to come back on.
Well, hey, I will keep that in mind. You are welcome anytime on this show, my friend. So, hey, until next week for the preview show, heck, until tomorrow for the Pick'em show. My name is Wack. Over in Houston, that is Will Turboff. He's going to Fort Bend Marshall game tonight, correct?
That's right. Fort Bend Marshall on Thursday.
There you go. Well, that is going to do us. That is going to be our show for today. Tune in tomorrow at noon, and we'll see you guys there. Take it easy, everyone.